Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew, and it's just a privilege to be here. I love Northern California. I miss it. Where we live now is a piece of heaven, but Marin County especially is just very near and dear to me and my wife. Well, the title of this talk is What Working with the Dying Taught Me About Living. And when I was young, in my early 20s, I lost two of the most important people in my life. When I was in college, I took a semester off, and I spent 6 months in a place called Sevilla, Spain. And when I was there, one of my closest friends, a young girl named Kirsten Reed, died of a cerebral aneurysm at 20 years old. Kirsten was one of the great lights in my life. We were incredibly close friends. She was one of those people that I was so looking forward to watching her life unfold, who she might take as a partner, if she had children, what career she might choose. It was like a movie that you really wanted to see. And when she died, I was devastated because I would never get to see that movie. I was also sad because I did not know that the last time I saw her would be the last time I saw her. So I finished college. I ended up going back to Spain after college to spend a year, actually 10 months in Barcelona. And when I was in Barcelona, my mother died of metastasized breast cancer. Now, I know most of us love our parents. My mother, Edith Mitchell Block, to this day is one of the most remarkable women I've ever known. She was brilliant. She was deeply wise. She was hilarious, incredibly irreverent. And myself, my brother, my sister, she was our best friend and confidant. Her death left such a void that I didn't know that I would ever be able to fill it. So, looking back over those 3 years and seeing two of the closest people in my life die, I asked inwardly, I asked Spirit, I said, is there a message here? Is there a truth that I need to glean to explain some of this? And after deep introspection, it became clear that I would never again live in Spain. So, Diane mentioned that I have been on a spiritual quest, and I actually am on the same path now that I was all those many years ago. And as part of my teaching, we have a certain belief about death, and that death is a door, and a beautiful and natural part of life, and it doesn't need to be feared, it needs to be embraced, and all these are beautiful, and I still believe that to this day. But the challenge that some of us spiritual folks get into is that we forget that even though all that is true, that the body still needs to grieve. It needs to grieve like it needs to breathe. If you eat a delicious meal and you finish it, that meal is done, but I guarantee there's going to be a reaction a bit down the road that needs to happen if you're going to stay healthy. And so people that are on a quest of higher truth, sometimes they mind their way through their grieving. Well, it caught up with me years after that, and I was living in Marin County, which is just over the bridge, as many of you know, and I heard about the Center for Attitudinal Healing. So I checked it out, and I thought it resonated for me, and I decided to volunteer. So during my indoctrination period, I'm learning about the center, starting to be trained to volunteer. I meet Jerry Jampolsky, and he asked me, why are you here? So I told him the truth. I said, I'm here because I want to help people. I want to do good work. And in this most incredibly compassionate, gentle way, as only Jerry can do, he looked at me and said, that's a load of crap. He said, focus on your own healing, and maybe you'll be of use to someone else. So I took him at his word, and I got deeply in to the work we do at the center, and I was there for 7 years, and I was working with the dying the entire time, and I spent, as Diane said, 4 years on the board, and many years as board president. And again, in working with the dying, for those who had the experience, it isn't, people say, oh, there's such wisdom that comes over the dying. Well, that can happen, but I saw people who died kicking and screaming and angry and cursing at the divine. I mean, one of the things we were taught is that there's no right or wrong way to die. And I didn't have an attachment to how people went. But there were those people who did move into deep grace and deep surrender, and they had deep wisdom. And it was those people whom I gleaned some enormous wisdom. And I guess there is something about death sometimes that can be a filter, and all that is extraneous and superfluous is taken out, and what is material and important stays. I guess life is never more precious than when the end is in sight. So it's from those people that I put together some things I'm going to share with you, some insights that I learned from them. And the first insight I want to talk to you about is that the people we love and the life that we lead are going to disappoint us from time to time. Be sure to love them anyway. Love the people and love your life. Now, I'm being gentle here because disappoint is an interesting word. The truth is that the people we love most have the power to break our hearts and devastate us. That's why they're close. Strangers, it's hard for a stranger to hurt us, isn't it? And I think it's probably their job. Our children, our mates, our family, our close friends. We come and we bump into each other and we round each other out. And this is a truth that I found fundamentally. You have a choice every time. So we're always going to have a choice. We're going to hold hurt and hold resentment or love them. And I have a very dear friend who lives in Santa Fe, and his name is Michael, and he had a 25-year marriage that ended, and he's been single for quite some time, and he's very committed to having a significant relationship. And he met this one woman, and it seemed almost immediate this was going to be something big. So he came to me just to talk about it, and he was very concerned. He was afraid of being hurt. And so I responded very much in Jem Polsky style, and I said, oh, don't waste a minute worrying about being hurt, because you definitely will. In fact, you'll probably be shattered. Be sure to get as much love, to harvest as much love as you can before that day comes. And actually, he was very encouraged by that, because he went in and he put his helmet on, and he's having an amazing experience. And there's been a lot of heartache, but it's also it's dwarfed by the amount of joy he's harvesting now. So I put together some tips, some guidelines to manage disappointment. And I'm just going to talk about them very quickly with you. And the first one is love fully. To whatever degree you can do that. If you're a 7-year-old and you want to write a crayon drawing to your mom and your dad, or if you want to share your macaroni and cheese with someone, which, by the way, is a very high degree of love in my book. Our last speakers mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt being abandoned and betrayed by everyone she loved, still gave her gift to others and to life. That's what I'm talking about. Because when it comes down to it, what really more is there? Is it more satisfying to gather assets, multiple cars, more square footage in the home you live in? Love fully. And then the next one, forgive often. And to me, the word forgive is synonymous with the word allow. And a great spiritual teacher of mine once told me that my spiritual consciousness, my state of consciousness, is the same thing as my ability to allow, my ability to accept. And so I am constantly welcoming the things in my life that I might not have chosen consciously. I'm welcoming them as teachers. I try to be as open as I can because I don't want to be a blockage to people that I love. I want to support them even if I don't agree with their choices. The next one is very appropriate for me. Apologize easily. I was born with a very critical mind and a lack of patience. And this combination has been a tremendous blessing to those who I love and who love me in my life. So we talk about you have to get 7 or 9 hugs a day. I got to apologize 7 or 9 times just to keep people in my life from running away. I've gotten very good at it. I have no issue around it. It just flows like water. If you have an issue apologizing, there's some work you have to do. I'm not attached to being right anymore, and I was so attached to being right. All right, and lastly, and this is maybe the most important, seek to understand others more than being understood. And I first heard this from St. Francis of Assisi. And the city in which I live is the patron city of St. Francis. Now, I'm a recovering pleaser, and I have no shame about it. Our last speaker just admitted to being a recovering sex addict. I'm a recovering pleaser. And I'm sure there's a bunch of us in the room, maybe not so recovering. Yeah, I have a hand over there. Nicely done. I think the world is really supported and watered and nurtured by people who want to please. But for pleasers, it is so important to be understood. Can't you see my heart? Can't you feel my intention? And when we're not, it's so painful. And we so want to explain, and what I found is if I can just move against that, if I can resist that, I'm a greater vehicle for healing and for love. And for me now, it's as important, if not more important, simply to understand the soul that is in front of me. All right? The next insight I'll talk to you about, one of my favorite quotes by Carolyn May says this, and I'm going to read it too because I love it so much. Just let go. Let go of how you thought your life should be and embrace the life that is trying to work its way into your consciousness. I love this because so many of us say, oh, my life is so unsatisfying. This is not what I thought I'd get. But it's what is. And I have a very dear friend in Santa Fe who has been afflicted by enormous medical setbacks. She lives in chronic pain. She has tremendous medical complications. And one day, in absolute frustration, she said, Matthew, this is not the life I chose. This is not what I signed up for. This is not my karma. And I had to very gently say, well, it's in your now. So if it's in your now, it's in your now. That doesn't mean you can't transform it or heal it or transcend it. It means you have to embrace it. The second insight, release attachment to all things, but invest fully in all that is important to you. The things that are important to me, there's many things important in this life. Attitudinal healing was certainly one of them for many years. And right now, my marriage is important and my spiritual path is very important. But I had a realization not so long ago, and it said that a marriage and a spiritual path bring nothing to you. It is you who brings everything to them. And it's in the bringing of your best to your marriages, to your spiritual paths, to whatever's important, that lifts them up, that makes them noble, that makes them sacred. It is we who imbue importance and meaning into the things of our life. And that's the power we have as human beings, to choose what is important. And there's no wrong or it's right. It's simply what you choose. Make sure you choose wisely. I love Gary and Linda's talk about making those conscious decisions from love and not from fear. And I'm going to be candid with you. We'll talk about marriage for a second. Marriage turned out to be very different than what I thought it was going to be. And had I known all those years ago, almost 18 years ago, what I know now, had I known then what I know now, I might not have gotten married. That being said, I am as happy now as I have ever been. And my marriage is a large part of that. So things like marriage, things like a spiritual path, things like parenthood, they pull us into parts of ourselves that we would not go willingly. They compel us to go there. And it's in going there that we are rounded and deepened and strengthened so that we can be greater vehicles for love. It's not always a pleasant journey. There's a wonderful movie. It's actually a series of 3, and it's one of the most profound movies I've ever seen, and yet it's just riddled with unnecessary violence, and it's called The Matrix. And I love these films because there's such great truth in it, and my favorite scene in the entire series is in the 3rd movie, the last scene. And the hero is named Neo, and he's doing battle with the Nemesis, which is an embodied computer program called Mr. Smith. And they have these superhero powers in the Matrix, and they're flying into each other. They're crashing through buildings. Neo's being driven, 15 feet into the ground. And the program Smith says, "Why, Neo? Why do you get up when you're beaten and broken? You know you can't win. Why do you keep trying? Why do you keep getting up to fight?" Neo rises out of the mud and the water, bleeding, and he goes, "Because I choose to." And it was one of the most profound moments of any film. I mean, that really explains everything in my life. Things that are sacred because I choose them to be. I have a good marriage because I choose to keep it great. I have a deep connection to the divine because I keep it fresh every day because I choose to. Alrighty. Going back to the attitudinal healing, when I was working at the center at the height of my work there, I was putting 40 hours a month on top of my full-time job, spending time with people who are dying, doing my board responsibilities. I was never more overwhelmed. I was never more exhausted, and yet never more fulfilled. It was truly one of the most transcendental experiences of my life. The next insight I'm going to share with you, number 3, is discover what you love and find a way to work it into your life. Okay? It doesn't mean you have to make a living at it. I love to speak. I did it for years and years for free. I still do it for free. I'm very lucky that I make a living doing it. But there's other things that I brought into my life that I love, that I don't get paid for. It just keeps my life real and open and flowing. And so many of us, our noses are pressed so tightly to the grindstone. We don't lift our head to see, what is it that I love? And there's a magnificent quote by my favorite poet in the world. And it goes like this: let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you really love. And I have this on my computer, along with another Rumi quote you're going to see in a moment. That guidance is there for us if we can get to it. If we can quiet ourselves to get to it. And of course, this world we live in doesn't really lend itself to that. With YouTube and email and Facebook and Twitter and all the things that take our attention and keep us stimulated. Life is meant now to keep us stimulated, and it takes a tremendous commitment to quiet all that and to go within and be still and occupy ourselves one breath at a time. It does take a commitment, and every great master that's ever walked this earth, I don't care if it's Buddha or Jesus or Zoroaster or Lao Tzu or any of them, always said, you must spend time each day in silence. And Linda was talking about when she got sick, spending that time in silence. It's powerful. If you don't make that time for yourself, it will be made for you, as Linda so eloquently shared. And so my friends and clients and family come to me if they want input. My first thing is always get still, quiet the mind, see what you come up with. All right? Insight number 4, and this is the most powerful and it's also the hardest to understand. So see if you can breathe through this with me. There is some gift, something to learn in all situations if you can get it. Now, it's very hard to have this conversation with someone who is dying, someone who is in incredible pain, because pain tends to focus our attention and it's hard to lift our head and see the bigger picture. And you would not want to walk up to someone who is suffering and say, wow, why'd you call that one in? What's the gift? You might lose some front teeth. I speak from experience on that. Only happened once. And it was so powerful to me to learn, this is a wonderful quote by St. Augustine. It says, let us understand that God is a physician and that suffering is medicine for salvation and not a punishment for damnation. There's a reason why suffering exists in the world. There's a reason for disease and war and strife. And I find that when we commit to a life of ease, like our poet so eloquently shared this morning, we tend to move out of that paradigm. But I realize that the things that befell me, like the death of my best friend and my mother, my wife and I had a huge financial setback back in 2000 when the market crashed. All these things were so painful, and yet looking back, they led me and led us to our next step, which was resplendent. They would not have happened without the precursor. It was all perfect. And when I speak, I talk about this concept of life unfolding in absolute perfection. And do we have the ability and the insight to see the perfection, to see the gift? Now, you can't tell someone that. They have to get it for themselves. And when they do and you witness it, wow, powerful. Life unfolds in absolute perfection. And again, Lyndon Gary talked about Ram Dass loving all things. I haven't got there yet. But I try to embrace everything, including things I hate. Nuclear weapons, terrorism, military, now I'm trying to love them, trying to see the perfection in what's happening in the Middle East. We just spent 2 weeks in Israel during this tremendously delicate time, and I was just loving everything. I was embracing the Palestinians, embracing the Israelis. How much can I love these people? They can't do it for themselves. It's not easy, and I fall into despair and negativity sometimes. I don't stay there too long. Life unfolds in absolute perfection. And so the last story I'm going to tell you involves the greatest love and the greatest successes are your greatest risks. And when you lose them, and by the way, folks, and I say this not to be threatening, it's all going to go someday because we're going to go someday. Make sure you don't lose the lesson. So this last story is about a young Well, she wasn't so young. She was a middle-aged woman from China. Her name was Su Ling, and she was one of the last people I saw before I completed my work at the center. She came from a very poor province in China. She said to me once that as a girl, she was the property of her father until she would someday marry and become the property of her husband. She said, Matthew, never come back as a Chinese woman. I said, okay, I'll try to do that. And she was dying of metastasized breast cancer. She had a double mastectomy. She was filled with radiation and chemotherapy, and obviously her hair had all fallen out, and she was in a tough place. And so the last time I saw her, I walked in, we were sitting very close because she couldn't speak very loud, so I had to be very close to her. And I'm with her, and she all of a sudden seizes up into the most just incredible pain, clenches down, and she's going, and she is absolutely in incredible pain, right in front of me, a foot, 12 inches from my nose. And the training I got from the center was that when you are in the presence of that, to come into complete and absolute peace of mind. To accept it completely. Don't try to stop it. Don't try to heal it. Just try to embrace it. And I watched her like I was watching a fish in an aquarium. And I came into peace with myself. And if you can do that, the people who are going through their situation may reach out and take some of your peace of mind. And I got to that place, and something, I don't know what, came through me, and I reached my hand out, and I put my hand under her chin, and I lifted up her head so that she was now looking up. And in a moment, her pain was gone. I don't know what that was. It didn't come from me. But we had a talk, and when she got herself together, she said, Matthew, this cancer is the greatest gift of my life. I said, Su Ling, what are you talking about? And she goes, if not for the cancer, I would never know. I would never have known the gift of God's love. And it turns out when she came from China and she stayed in this country, she joined a Chinese Christian church. And when she got sick, members of her congregation came to her home and watered her plants and fed her cat and came to the hospital and brushed her hair and rubbed her feet and helped sponge bathe her and fed her special food. And she had never experienced love like that. And when I heard her say that, and it was overwhelming to see this woman just riddled with cancer say it was the greatest gift of her life, I knew that she got what she came to get, and I knew that she was not going to be long for this world. And she died 2 days later. Deep, deep inspiration. That to me is the true courage. So I will leave you with this, which is my favorite quote of all. If there are no ups and downs in your life, it pretty much means you're dead. So stop whining. And I want to thank you so much for all your time and your attention.